Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Unqualified Podcast, the podcast where two lifelong fans try to make sense of their teams and usually fail. I'm Pat, joined as always by Brendan.
What's up, my friend? How are you?
I am good. I am
You
good.
feel refreshed, recharged after spending some time in upstate New York?
Yeah, I'm ready to go, man. The crazy thing is, it was hotter up there, and I know you know it was hotter up there than here in Florida. So
Yeah.
it's wild. Before we jump into it, I just want to shout out our sponsor, Dr. Arnie Oliveira and the Empowerment Counseling Center. You know, pal, we joke all the time that sports is like therapy. Being a fan can be an emotional roller coaster, but real therapy can genuinely change lives. And Dr. Arnie has been helping individuals, couples, and families for over a decade navigate life's biggest challenges and create lasting positive change. So if you or someone you know needs help making a change or just some support, definitely have them reach out to Arnie for a free consultation. 407-775-2949.
Let me add in a little additional plug for our friend Arnie. Obviously, Arnie's a good friend of ours, but as somebody who's very experienced in therapy and especially experiencing trauma and trying to work through some difficult pieces, I think it's very important to find a therapist that, understands how to connect with another person, understands a healthy approach to try to take with another, human that's in that position that is struggling, working through some of the difficult more difficult times in one's life. I always come back to it's therapy is great, but it's great when you find the right partner, a right therapist. And, like I said, you and I have known Arnie a long time. I have a lot of faith and trust in what he does and what he can do, and taking like the best approach in terms of helping somebody work through some of those difficult challenges. But more important, whether it's Arnie, whether whoever it is, that relationship with your therapist is key, and making sure you have the right person who you match with well to be able to put you in a position to be able to truly process what challenges you.
Absolutely. I echo those sentiments, my friend. So let's start with our baseball team. They're stumbling here to the midway point as we are at the All-Star break.
Brutal.
It's been a rough go. We haven't spoke since the owner came out right before July 4th and appeared on the show podcast with Joel Sherman and John Heyman and, really responding to the team's struggles. And let's be honest. I mean, those guys, they probably pulled some punches. It's not like he was in there with Mike Francesa. Okay. I don't know if he got all the hardball questions that, real fans like us maybe would have asked him, but he did take some accountability. And I'll start with the first quote here. He said, "The weight of responsibility on my shoulders is because I came in and I said I wanted to do something great for New York and I'm failing." So, I mean, it's good you have an owner who's acknowledging that. What did he say? We're
Yes.
going to win a championship in 3 to 5 years. We're going to be the Dodgers of the East. Okay. Okay. And, it hasn't really come to fruition, not by lack of trying, okay? Not by lack of spending money, because he's definitely done that. But, as we know with these owners, it's all about who you hire. And you put the right people in place and you step away and let them do their job. And, to this point, you can make the argument that he hasn't put the right guys in place. There's a lot to be said here about the GM, and we'll get to what he said about him. But what do you take of that quote and him, obviously kind of taking accountability for the failures?
To your point, he wasn't in the room with the hard hitting journalist that is Mike Francesa, because when Mike Francesa is Mike Francesa, he's Walter Cronkite. Mike is a special bird in his own way and with his own ego. But much like our owner, I think where he buried us to some degree, right? And I think as a Met fan, if you just walk it back to that point in time when he made that point and how he was going to approach it, what his mindset was, right? Like our fan base, we're coming off what we felt like was terrible ownership. Now we see a guy with all the money in the world coming in, and we're thinking we're going to have some sort of run similar to the Yankees. So, I think at least I thought about it that way, and I'm assuming a lot of other Met fans thought that same way too. So, obviously, showing his inexperience, showing his ego, and thinking that absolutely money could buy everything in the game of baseball. Now, to some degree, it can. We can look at the Dodgers. Clearly, they've figured out in terms of spending a lot of money and winning. But if you look at other teams in the MLB, you look at the teams like the top five payrolls. I think outside of the Dodgers, they're most of the teams there have losing records. And, at the end of the day, the game is a little bit more complicated. It's more complicated than analytics, as we've talked about in the past. So, from that perspective, I think it requires Uncle Stevie kind of fall on the sword a bit, walk it back a little bit, focusing on what the organization needs, focus on what's important to the fan base. Again, because where he could have stepped in last year and thrown his weight around because the money truly doesn't matter to him. Why didn't we give Pete that money to show up, play first base for us, hit another 35, 40 home runs? Right? He's going to do this for the Orioles for what is still a reasonable contract. And the way Pete's built, he could have given that to us for another 3 or 4 years and still have been the right decision. I think going forward, he needs to know when to step in and override some of the other baseball operators when it's the right thing for the organization.
Just a reminder, guys, if you guys are not following us on Instagram, check us out at the UQ Podcast. And you can catch full episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You know, coming out and doing this interview and just, breaking his silence,
Yeah, that was a big
it's
thing.
almost like the bare minimum that he could do as an owner, right? There was a lot of fans, a lot of people in the media calling for him to say something during this terrible run they've had here in the first half and the struggles. And, it's great that he's taken accountability. He went on the podcast, he answered some questions, some medium to softball questions. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's going to come down to, like I said, putting the right people in place and letting them do their jobs. We see it across town how not to do it with the Jets and Woody Johnson and his, meddling because, Woody does spend money. And this is not to get on a Jets diatribe, but Woody does spend money, but, he just doesn't hire the right people. And after a while, when it's not going well, then he starts meddling and then it gets worse. And then eventually he fires them. So, yeah, we see
Yeah,
how the good organizations do it.
from the Woody comparison, and I can understand what you're saying. Baseball's a little bit different. You know, Not that football isn't connected to the fan base, but I mean, more or less, right? Woody's asking, 8 week or 8 Sundays or it's a Monday, Thursday, but 8 weeks, 8 days out of the season to show up, fill that stadium, concessions, merchandise, etc., where he has to fill that park as best as he can over 81 nights in a season. And I think a little bit of that disconnect of where the fan base is and what's actually going to draw them in. I do think there are times where I can forgive, I think, a baseball owner for meddling a little bit. And where, again, not, I know I haven't shut up about the Pete thing all year long. That was the time to say, like, hey, I appreciate what you're trying to do, Stearns, but we need this guy. This guy, no matter what's going on, he's going to show up. He's going to play. He's going to hit home runs. He's going to protect Soto in the lineup. The fans are going to, be happy because they love him. I think that was a miss. And to your point, you don't want them meddling all the time. But I think in baseball, it is a little bit different just because we do ask baseball fans to kind of go above and beyond, I think in comparison to football fans, just based on the quantity of games.
100%. And I don't even look at that if he were to do that and say that to Stearns as meddling, really. I mean, I look at it like, a head coach on a sideline, like telling his coordinator, hey, let's run the ball here. He's not calling the plays, he's not telling him how to do his
Yeah.
job, but I want you
Yeah.
to run the ball here in this situation. Cohen had the opportunity to do that, to tell Stearns, you have a guy who's the all-time home run leader for this franchise, the face of the franchise, an iconic Met. We're going to keep him around, okay? Because he's good for our clubhouse. He's a leader, and he's a guy we can build around. Cohen could have done that, and like you said, he didn't end up doing that, obviously. And Pete's on to bigger and better things. And let's talk about that for a second, the fan experience, because he did comment on that, and you sent me a video when I was on vacation responding to the incident at Citi Field where a fan was ejected for the Fire Stern sign, right? So here's what Cohen said about that. He said, you have the right to express yourself, but not to the point where you're ruining other people's experiences.
Huh.
There was conflicting reports on that in terms of was the guy like being obnoxious versus was he just, expressing his opinion. There definitely is a fine line, but I don't think you should be ejected from
Yeah.
the stadium.
Yeah, I agree. There is a fine line, and I think sometimes maybe in like the New York fan base, a Philadelphia fan base, certain fan bases, you might have trouble finding what that fine line is of being
Yeah.
obnoxious and not.
Yeah.
But
Just wear a
you know,
paper
again,
bag. Just wear a paper bag.
I mean, he
The
had like I think
classic.
like a small little sign, right? Like, yeah, there's a paper bag. I think, again, like in September, like I said, I probably show up. I still haven't figured out. Am I going to do like the white Oriole jersey? Am I going to do the black? I like the idea of the black on, with the orange. Let me tell you, when I was a kid, I had my mother get me a gift for my birthday. Remember how the satin starter jackets were all the big deal? I had her go to like a local like sporting goods store and they custom made one for me because at the time I was a big Tennessee fan, so Andy Kelly, Alvin Harper, Carl
Mm,
Pickens, the cobweb backfield. So I had her make me this all black satin jacket with Tennessee across in orange with the UTMs on the side. Very nice. So
nice.
I think I might lean all black with the orange Oriole is I guess what I'm saying. But like what happens, like, if and a bunch of us just show up in our Oriole Pete Alonso's jerseys, chanting for him, chanting to fire Stearns, just having that moment of camaraderie, amongst the fans during a miserable season. I don't think that's ruining the experience for anybody. Just because I know there's a lot of frustration within our fan base.
And rightfully so. And here's what he said on Stearns. We'll figure it out on what changes need to be made, but it won't be David. Okay, it sucks to hear that, obviously, as a diehard Mets fan, both of us. But what other choice do we have other than to move on right now and hope that he can fix this roster and the disaster that it was this season? I mean, that's kind of where I am with it right now. Like this season is kind of just spiraled into, okay, let's see what the young guys got. Let's see what we can build on for the future. It really is unfortunate that we're at this point, but okay, Stearns is going to be here and he's going to serve out the duration of his contract. Doesn't look like he's going anywhere. For some reason, Cohen, it's his guy and he has this unfounded confidence in him. The funny thing though that he said was, he not get any credit for 2024? Like what credit do you want to give him for 2024? I mean, he basically came in and basically inherited the team that the way it was, and then he dismantled it. So what do you want to what do you want to give him? Like what kind of credit is he getting? So I'm
Yeah,
just that's kind of where I'm at right now.
yeah, no, agreed, right? Like if he inherits that team in 24 and is able to replicate and move forward 1, 2 seasons later, but to your point, right, he started getting the fingerprints on the organization, really in the 25 season, and it was nice, right? Like, okay, yes, we got off to a great start, but since mid June or June 11th ish, June 12th of last year, I mean, we're basically at the bottom of the league in the way we show up and play. And, maybe Stearns turned the corner with the Peterson trade. Let me tell you, Peterson giving up a home run and this to the first batter, I wasn't upset about because, again, not easy, but we're in a tough spot, right? Like, if he's going to support Stearns right now, right? Like, and he's saying, like, I guess what Stearns is under contract for another 2.5 years ish, something like that. We're going to write it out with him. Then, what are we looking at today? Like, where can Stearns go with the way the roster is currently put together that helps us at least get back to maybe a 500 team next year, and then maybe a postseason type, a wild card type team, 2 years from now. We could look and say, all right, the Soto and the two kids in the outfield seemingly could be a bit of a foundation for us or something that we could look to and say, like, there's success here. Sure, if we don't trade Lindor, which it seems like Lindor's off the table. Correct me if I'm wrong. Based on some recent reports,
You
obviously
you
that could
hear
change.
conflicting things, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, like, and I get it, right? Like, technically, you don't, I mean, yeah, and you don't have to get rid of them. I think you should get rid of them at this point just because there still appears to be some level of friction. Something happened, right? Like, and maybe what happened was like, here is our top pay guy, the leader of the team, and then we're going to bring this guy in, and you basically, it was a hard pill for him to swallow, I think, and make the turn of, look, we just had this amazing year, now I'm second fiddle to this guy, right? Like, I understand the ego piece may play into it a bit, but again, he's on the back end of his, he's getting into the mid 30s at this point, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's always one of those things like, what are you getting back? You know, it's easy to say, okay, trade the guy, but what does it look like? What's the return? And if it's not to me worth it, as deemed by Stearns, then you could still use Lindor. You know, so I'm kind of on the fence about it. You know, with him, I think if he does come back, I mean, he does make it past this deadline or this season, I think there needs to be a conversation there in the clubhouse between those guys and kind of almost like a passing of the torch. Like this is going to be Juan's team now. You know, I feel like
Yeah.
that might be a tough thing for Lindor to swallow, but it's all part of like the evolution of an athlete's career. You know, it's not like he won't still be a leader on the team. It's just like you're turning it over now to the younger guys. So I don't know. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, he could, if they decide to keep him, I think there's definitely a role for him. But if they do trade him, like you see
You
Bichette
know,
going to shortstop, right?
yeah. I mean, I don't, no matter what has happened this year, I don't think Bichette could. I think he's not leaving us. I think he'd be foolish to leave us and not take all that money come next
Right.
year.
Yeah.
And, maybe he'll eventually settle in and, get back to who he was prior to.
You've seen signs lately
Yeah.
with him. Yep.
And, again, like the piece with Lindor, as I said, probably 2 months ago at this point when I was saying trade him, not because I don't like Lindor. I mean, he's been a great Met for us. But the thing is, if we can't reconcile and, he's, getting to that point in his career, like value is not going to, it's not going to rise at 32 years old, right? Like we're not going to get more for him, as a Met, as we go forward,
Not going to get anything for
so
Vientos either right now.
oh my God. Like I said, the decision to again remove Pete probably destroyed Viento's opportunity as a Met for us, like having a productive Met career. I think now he's so far into his head because he's been a disaster at first base. Like whatever we thought we could get out of him or, could salvage or see him, develop a little bit more. I feel like that is not gonna happen at this point, and, all you could have done is kept him at freaking third base and, had Pete play first, but, I don't know how many times I could come back to saying the Pete decision was terrible, but the Pete decision was terrible.
Yeah, pal. I want to like have a therapy session with you and just help you get through
We need
this
to get
because
we need to get Arnie on,
yeah.
and, Arnie's gonna have to talk me down from this one.
It's hard. Like just the finality of some of the things that have happened, Pete leaving and now the fact that we know Stearns is going to be here for the next few years. I want to like have a woosah moment and be like, all right, let's move forward and let's make the best of it and stop, lamenting on the past. I know it's hard. I know it sucks, but for our own health, for our own mental health.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think what could help you move beyond it is find a first baseman that can hit for power and play every day and not make a shit ton of errors. That would help.
Wait. We had one, right?
I think anything that resembles a true rotation would be fantastic. I mean, like I feel bad for Singa. I know it's not easy to make that transition from one country to the next, and and again, culturally, right? Like I feel like Japanese culture, it can be a tougher time to assimilate in the U.S.
But he
But
was better earlier. That's what doesn't make sense about that point, pal. Like I agree with
I'm
you.
trying to justify it somehow, my friend. He's a disaster. Like I feel like we could go out there and just toss basically like softball, and we would probably have a similar ERA.
And the pitching that was basically the crux of the downfall and last year. And to people saying, "Oh, they wouldn't have ever won with this core, so what does it matter that they broke it up?" Well, they were in the NLCS in 24. They had a great first half last year before it all went to shit. So, I mean, I don't think they were far off if they could have fixed the pitching. And Stearns just decided, "Hey, like we're going to blow it all up. We're going to blow up the core. I'm going to bring in guys that fit whatever kind of analytics I'm looking for. We can just plug and play and we're not going to miss a beat." And he was way off on that.
Yeah, and when you look at the NL, who is going to be the team that goes and throws the money out there and tries to build that dominant roster? Like I think in the NL Central, you could build differently. I think in the NL East, it's just very difficult with the Braves, with the Phillies, and then you being a New York fan base. Like that's gonna be a tough sell. I think it's a tough strategy. And again, this version that we're playing with the analytics, I can't see us being, a competitive team in the next 2.5 years at this point while he's still, our GM, and which brings you to like, hey, like, why are we still doing this? Why are we going to sign up for 2.5 more
I
years of
know.
this?
I know, man. I know. But it kind of is what it is. And let's just hope that he can get us out of this mess because that's our only hope right now. Here's what Cohen said about his ownership style. He said, I give a lot of rope and now I got to pull in some rope and figure out how to improve things. Okay. That basically says maybe you're going to meddle a little bit. You've
Wait,
given the guys,
does that say I should have done something to keep Pete and not let this guy throw
you,
him out the door?
you,
Thank you.
you could take it, pal. Like, yeah. I mean, to me, that's saying, he kind of was obviously trusting Stearns in the front office, after that 24 run. Like, okay, these guys know what they're doing. And when the shit hit the fan, now he's realizing, hey, now I got to give a little input here, a little more. So we'll see that, what that means going forward.
Yeah.
But
I mean, again, we did, to your point, we didn't have to blow it up. We just needed started pitching. We would have been a lot better off with some,
think about
like,
all the guys he brought into in the pen too that sucked last year.
yeah.
Ugh.
I mean, it, again, like there's some hit and miss. I get it. Like we could look at the Peralta trade. He went and got his boy Freddie, right? Freddie 4 2/3,
It's
and
not even
Freddie four
five
and
inning
two.
Freddie anymore.
No, he's Freddie 4 2/3 at this point on a good day. And, again, like I struggle because if Sproat goes out there and throws those gems like he had a couple weeks ago, right? It hurts to see if Jet becomes that infielder, everyday second baseman, for the Brewers, it hurts. And again, like I understand that I'm not trying to contradict myself. I know we need a starting pitching at least coming into this year, but it just felt like the Freddie move and the Bo Bichette move, especially, were like it was just like we have a whole lot of nothing going on. These guys are gone now. I have to come up with something. And I felt again, we've given too much to get Freddie Peralta for 1 year, and Bo Bichette is going to just suck up the 80 million plus whatever for 2 years, and we're going to just sit here 2 years from now. All right, like how do we turn the corner? Like it's disgusting watching the Marlins, and I'm happy for the Marlins, but it's tough to watch them with a winning record with a fraction of our payroll.
Yeah.
So,
No, I know.
am I complaining? I feel like I'm complaining.
Okay, so my last question to you about the Mets before we move on, because it's aggravating.
Yeah. I have to take more blood pressure medication. That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Cohen coming out and breaking his silence. Are you encouraged by this? Are you more pessimistic or are you indifferent about it?
I look, it was a big thing, right? Like not him coming out, but a big thing that he hadn't been coming out and
Right.
effectively not talking to anybody. I'm sure it's a tough hit for him. He's a person with a lot of money.
Ego.
He's, yeah, the ego. And it's not like maybe something he could tip the scales so much, like maybe in the way he's earned that money. Like a lot of people who earn that type of money, somewhere there's some pressure, scale tipping in their favor. Not to say like a level of manipulation or doing anything.
Right.
Maybe I am saying that. I don't know.
But
But
if Stearns was working for his hedge fund and had these kind of results,
oh my God.
where
I
would he be?
mean, I don't want to say it. I'm saying he'd definitely be out of a job, but like
In the
it's a
swamps, in
serious
the
game.
swamps in the Meadowlands somewhere?
He's hanging with Jimmy, and life is looking a lot different, or maybe no life at all. I don't know. But with that, look, there's a lot of ego there. I'm indifferent because, again, right? Like it wasn't a hard hitting interview like you alluded to earlier. He was so far behind in getting out and being somebody that should be a mouthpiece for the organization. You own it. You paid a ton for it. You're throwing around a lot of money each year. Again, I appreciate it. I think all Met fans appreciate the fact that we have an owner that can spend the money. I think it just were the frustration is it doesn't make any sense if you're just burning the money either, right? For the sake of it. Again, I could look at the Freddie deal and I think the Bichette deal and feel like, it was a little bit of we need to do something panic type move as
Yeah.
opposed to being like calculating and trying to build the organization. The one thing that scares me from where we were like a year ago to where we are now is the minor league side of it. When you look at the minor league rankings, we've noticeably dropped off in that category. And sure, Nolan has come up and we have the two young
Benj and
guys in the
Ewing. Yep.
outfield.
Yep.
But without that
Yeah.
without a solid pipeline,
That's
like we
that's
are,
key. That's critical for sure. 100%. It is
yeah,
concerning. I know the MLB draft just started. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, things are going to have to change in that pipeline for sure if they're going to be a competitive team in the next
yeah.
5, 10 years.
And that's where I think you can still get a good return for Lindor today. I think, again, we can still get something that doesn't maybe backfill what we spent for Peralta. I think we could get something that at least, can help us in a couple years. And that's the thing, right? Like that's where I'm just trying to look at this because when you look at our outfield, we say we're good. We look at our infield, we're struggling watching Alvarez play at this point. Beatty, Vientos, right? Bichette is struggling.
It's like,
Lindor, like,
you have these prospects that were so heralded, and it's like you just don't wanna give up. You don't wanna cut the ties yet with them, but we all see it. They're just not the guys, and even, like, with a guy like Beatty, okay, maybe he's not the guy you thought he was. He could, be a utility player. He could be someone that,
yeah,
comes off the bench. Like, it doesn't mean that it's a failure completely, but they have to recognize, "Okay, this guy is not an everyday player." And,
yeah.
like, I feel
And
like
that's
that
the
with
problem.
yeah, yeah. I feel like that with Alvarez too, man. Like, I'm just so tired of his at bats and, like, we see Terrans is much more solid behind the dish, so it's just tough to watch a lot of nights.
So I'll say this when you look at our team today, the way it's put together, outside of the three outfielders and maybe a couple in the bullpen,
Right. Yeah.
Nolan, right? There's Nolan you would feel good about. Where will we feel like, oh my, okay, like we have a lot to put together to be
Yes.
competitive. And our record is deserving, right? We should be where the Rockies are. We are where the Rockies are. But that is the level of talent we put out there every single day. And again, I got to see like this payroll get flushed out. I need to see like us be able to replenish some, potential young talent, and again, like see some of these young guys come up and give them a chance, in the second half of the year, which I know they will once we hit August. It's going to happen. That would be again, I think, a healthier approach because again, I don't want to see another shitty roster that we pay a ton of money for come next year and for us to finish under 500 again. Like it's not going to work that way.
Yep. No, I know. And I'll just say for me, my arrow's pointing somewhere between indifferent and optimistic after that interview and hearing him speak. Like I said, it was the bare minimum he could do. He did take accountability. I think he knows he's got to crack the whip a little more. And like you said, a situation like the Pete thing, to go back to Pete, but he could have done that. He's talking about, all the rope he's giving. He could have just simply been like, hey, I like the other moves you've made. We're going to keep Alonso. Not even offer him a contract. It's just very
All right.
disheartening there.
It's not okay. That is a big part of it. But back it up to where they did this crap to him the year before.
Yep.
They treated him like shit.
Right.
He showed up. He had a really strong year for us. I mean, and then you're just like, no, like you put him through that, and he has always performed in New York,
Yeah.
right? Like,
He's our guy.
yeah, not only yes, he is our guy, but he's a really good human being,
Yes.
and he's a really good human being that
Good
showed up and
clubhouse
played every
guy.
game.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
know.
and
We promise this is the last Pete Alonso episode until Brendan
bullshit.
goes to the game in September. He's gonna have a
I
full
can't wait.
report after that. And I'll let him talk about Pete one more time after that
Yes,
game he
I
attends.
can't wait.
Let's
I was I was looking at online last night. I was like, I like the USA 250, road gray Oriole jersey. with the red, white, and blue numbers, the stars were, like I was like, oh, this looks nice. The one with the black. I'm still trying to figure that part out, but I hope to see a lot of Lonzo jerseys, whether Met, Oriole, in the stadium, over the course of that early week, right? The front half of the week series, and, showing him the support and love that, he deserves as a Met. And, I guess as a longtime Met fan with that guy in like my top 5 favorite Mets of all time, I'm going to be bitter for a while.
Let's just shift gears briefly before we talk about your World Cup experience, which I'm excited to hear about. We have training camp in a few weeks, man. It's going to be kicking off. It's crazy to think about. The off season just goes by so quickly. I just want to briefly touch on our teams and one big question from each team heading into training camp. We will have a full training camp preview episode in a couple weeks where we preview the Jets, we preview the Jaguars, we look at the preseason, and then we'll actually do a regular season preview, of course. First of all, we haven't talked about, and just briefly, the Geno stuff. Like, dude, come on, man. Like, just can you be a professional? You're grown up now. You're not a rookie anymore. The whole thing with, obviously, we don't know the whole story, that they're still investigating it, the domestic violence thing.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see what comes of that. I don't think it's going to be anything serious, but it's another headline, it's another hashtag LOL Jets. And then recently it comes out that he was speeding and he got pulled over or whatever and he didn't have a license. Dude, what are you doing? What are
And
you
yeah,
doing?
and it say like, my concern is where it ends up, with that first allegation that came out and how that all pans out. And, you could hope that it's not true and it didn't happen, right? Just
Yeah,
for the sake of the incident not happening, because that
sure.
to me is the bigger deal, right?
Yeah, 100%. That subject matter is nothing to be taken lightly at
Yeah.
all, for sure.
But to your point, the other pieces that like follow, and it's just like just sheer stupidity. And like I don't know, man. I don't know what the hell he's actually thinking. I mean, I honestly, again, not being a Jet fan, I'm all on Cade as being. I hope he legit gets a chance this year to show if he can be your quarterback. And you never know, right? Like maybe he's your kind of like a Brock Purdy esque, but I know he wasn't taking that. But somebody comes out as a rookie and can play. Especially now that you have, I think, more depth and more talent on that roster. It's just, I'm almost to the point based on what I've seen over the last few weeks. Like as a Jet fan, like I wouldn't want him suiting up as a Jet. I'm not that desperate. Like, yeah, I know it has been a tougher stretch, all these years not making the playoffs, coming off those back to back, right, AFC championship games. But for the love of God, like, why would you, like, as a Jet fan, I can't imagine wanting to see that guy suit up as a Jet, get under center, and lose games for you. I'd rather see Cade get his chance to win because like I think I'm still optimistic that if they can get to those 8 or 9 wins, but can they do it with this guy with that type of decision making? I mean, that's the one position decision making
Yeah.
is everything.
Listen, that's a fair point. I'm actually bullish on Geno this year. We've talked about it before. The offense, I'm not particularly concerned about that, but yeah, to me the decision making is definitely called into question here. Like I said, I don't think this is going to be something that lingers. Hopefully not, but it does give you a bit of hesitation and it's just more of the just constant in the headlines for the wrong reason with this team. To me, going into training camp, though, the biggest question to me for this team is will the defense look like a professional defense? And can they build that cohesion in training camp? Because we saw last season, I've talked about it. This was like, I don't know what this was towards the end of last season. This was like NFL Europe. This was not a just a defense that you could have any confidence in. I don't even know half the guys that were playing last year when it came to November and December. It was wild. So I think, the additions of Demario Davis, you bring in Minka Fitzpatrick, you draft David Bailey, your hope is that they could be more complementary, in terms of the defense and the offense. So I think that's the biggest question going into camp. Aaron Glenn's second season. Can he put his stamp on this defense now that he's going to be calling plays? He said calling plays is his superpower. Okay, let's see it, Aaron. Let's see you turn this defense. You brought in your guys, your handpicked guys, you and the GM, Muji. Let's see if they can turn it around. I think obviously training camp is a huge, part of that process and getting those guys on the same page. So to me, that's the biggest thing I'm looking at going into camp. Do you agree with that, or do you see it as a different question for the Jets? Is Geno your
No,
biggest question?
well, I think I mean, for Aaron Glenn's sake, taking some of the attention off of him is not the worst thing. I think to your point, the talent that has come in, the nice thing about defense is you could play with attitude. You could go 100 miles an hour, swarm to the ball. There is that type of
Effort doesn't
mentality
take
you could bring.
talent. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So and again, like we've seen it in Detroit with that defense at times. And again, like they made their turn after that really poor season. And I think as a Jets fan, that's what you're hoping for. But I think they will be a solid defensive unit this year, and it's going to look a lot better. Again, I was definitely more optimistic when we did our essentially preview post schedule release and what we thought in terms of wins and losses. I think I had 8, you had
Yeah.
9,
Yeah. Are you going down?
because
Are you reducing that?
I don't, I mean, let's put it this way. I thought somebody had grown up and could show up and be professional and mature at that all important position that basically if you don't have it, you don't win shit in the NFL. So with that being said, I'm a little nervous. If I was, I already put out the money, I would go to DraftKings and be like, maybe I need to cash out just in
Well,
case.
I think their over unders 5.5. So
Well, yeah, fair. I mean, we're playing off of 8 wins here. I'm talking about it from that
I hear
perspective.
you. I hear you.
But at this point, I think for Aaron Glenn, I think for the young talent, I think all young talent that is going to come in on the Jets roster in the next 12 to 24 months with all the draft picks they have. To me, we know Geno's not your future. Geno's a bridge, but if he can't get his life together, there's no way I'm going to let him destroy any bit of youth culture and movement that you could get. And like I said, if Kate shows you anything in OTAs and through training camp, as you get into early part of the season, I'm going to go ahead and probably ride with that guy because Gino, he's had his stops, and clearly the biggest disaster he's had is as a Jet, and now he's back. And for whatever reason, he can't get it together. So that's where I struggle if I were a Jets fan.
Week 10, over under week 10, Cade Klubnik starts a game.
I mean, I would hammer Cade starting a game. I think Cade
Under
well, based
before
on
week 10.
sorry, over under. Yeah, my apologies. I think it's under. I think there's a good chance you see him before week 10 because if this is the guy who showed up to be a Jets quarterback, this is the guy that is making these terrible decisions. Chances are he's going to make very bad decisions on the field. And again, I think there's more excitement, right? You feel more life with this team. And even if you were to have a 5-12 season, but you see young guys out there playing well and that you see a future in with all these draft picks coming, that you could add free agents. Like to me, that's what you have to preserve is the confidence level and, momentum and not let some guy who's a journeyman come and ruin that for your organization.
Listen, I'm excited about Cade. They moved up 18 spots to pick him. They
You
were a
should be.
guy he was targeting for sure. But the fear is, and I've seen it so many times, I don't want to throw him into the fire too early. They never let the quarterback sit and develop in this organization, and it always comes back to bite them. Listen, if he's ready, okay, so let's do it. Let's quickly transition to your team going into this training camp. To me, I'll just say what I think the biggest question is, and then you can obviously tell us what you think. It's Trevor Lawrence, and can he continue the trajectory? He had a trajectory, then he went down, and then it's like you got Liam Cohen, and then you saw last year really everything come together. Can he continue that rise and just become even a better quarterback? I've heard you talk about it before, just being a little bit off on the timing and the placement and some of these throws that could end up being huge plays. Can he close that gap? And obviously Cohen continue to be innovative and take the offense to another level. That's just from my perspective. What say you?
Yeah, again, right? There's been enough time now in the NFL, understanding the game, is not to seem silly, but I think there's that Sam Donald type of turnaround, like as far as like where we were early in the career. Now, I think Trevor's always consistently shown more if we compare it to Sam in the early days. But there is that like that second act and that second half of the career where you just make that jump, and it wouldn't be the first time I think we've seen it in our lives. Rich Gannon, huh? No, sorry,
Absolutely.
going
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
the
Vinny.
Vinny. Yeah. So I mean, it's more than possible. It's a complicated game. There's a lot of moving parts. Not everybody's in the same system, the same parts around you that allows you to grow and develop into, maybe reaching your full potential. Now to your point, I think we saw progress last year with Cohen. I'm excited about the wide receiver room, the tight end. I think the investment there. I think one of the gaps that would people say is like, ETN being gone. And like I'm good with that, right? I think we needed somebody more like a Tootin who's gonna, a bigger guy with the speed, and we can, run behind. I think like those bigger sets, especially with the tight ends. Those little things where I think we miss of maybe you and I of old school football, more play action, a little bit more the ground and pound, that goes a long way of helping a quarterback. And that's why I think this year having a little bit more of that approach, being a little bit bigger up front, especially with those tight end packages, having somebody like Tootin back behind you, to me, I feel much better that he is going to continue to evolve and make that jump. And, if we look back on the season and statistically, if he's a top five quarterback, statistically, right? I know that doesn't necessarily make you top five, but like if we look at his numbers and they're top five based on the weapons he has around him and the second year in the system with his coach, I'm not surprised. My only concern is defense. Some key guys that were there last year are not there this year. So at that linebacker level and the secondary level, how, again, like do we have the guys who could step up, fill in, and be competitive? We were a good defense last year. I think we're taking a step back this year, but is it going to look like the late 90s Jaguars where offensively we were much more dynamic, defensively not quite there? And I think that's what we're looking at as we go into, this upcoming season.
Dad, what were the 1999 Jaguars like?
Jesus. Let me tell you about Freddie Taylor, Tony Baselli, Mark Brunell, Keenan McCardle, Jamie Smith. Ah,
Well, we're going to have a lot to talk about in the coming weeks, pal. When our football
yeah.
teams kick off training camp, and then you get into the preseason, and before you know it, it's week one, man. And once football starts, it's just, the Mets won't have as much pain to give us, I think. I think we're at the point like that with that now. Like, it doesn't hurt as much because they're really not going anywhere this season. It's all about the future now, the direction of the team. So
Hey, it's all about 2029, okay? When it comes to New York
I want
Mets.
to ask you something. You went to the Norway Brazil game last week, World
Yes.
Cup game, MetLife Stadium. I want to ask you about the experience because you hear from a lot of Jets and Giants fans like the experience isn't great, and it's been many years since I've been to a Jets game at MetLife. So, what was it like for you? I mean, I can imagine the atmosphere was really cool.
Yeah, so this is my second big, we'll say, soccer match in the last 2 years. 2 years ago in the Gold Cup semi, I think it was a semifinal. Argentina and Canada was played in New Jersey before they had the final in Miami, and then this game with Brazil Norway. I mean, just we're in Jersey, so it's predominantly was Brazilian fans, so not shocking there. The mix though, there were enough Norwegians, so I think the fan base is going back and forth, seeing a little bit of the culture, right? Like you have the drums, on the other side of the stadium, just beating away for the Brazilians. You have the Norwegians doing their row and doing their
Just
different
been seeing
chants
them do that
throughout the.
everywhere in New York.
Yeah, I mean, well, they keep
Yeah.
winning. They keep winning, so that's a big part of it. But I think just seeing the cultures come together, seeing a lively atmosphere, it wasn't like you're a Mets or Giants fan going down to watch a game in Philadelphia where you couldn't wear the opposing team jersey. Everybody was, kind of respectful. And I know it's a massive event, so it's a little bit different at this stage. But to me, the atmosphere was great, and it was a great experience. My daughter is a Brazil fan. She was a big Neymar fan. So despite the loss, it was nice to see at least Neymar in his last game wearing that yellow jersey, get a goal for Brazil, which I think was, made me feel good as her father. And to me, it was like one of those once in a lifetime, or at least at this point, once in a lifetime experience, because I think by the time the World Cup may roll around again, I don't think, somewhere in my like 80s, am I going to want to like roll out and go to
You're
a
not going
game.
to Morocco in
So
2030?
no, that's probably not going to happen. I mean, yes, it would be nice. Morocco, Spain, Portugal, or even the first set of matches are going to take place in South America
Right.
just to commemorate the 100th
Yeah.
anniversary. So I think Uruguay, Argentina have some home games because of that. But, it's just like I said, it was a really, really fun experience. It was great to kind of see the two cultures come together from different ends of the world, the energy, the feeling. Like it was a great experience. I'd say the one thing I didn't expect to happen was the parking. So you're familiar with MetLife. There's a lot of parking spaces. You weren't allowed to park at MetLife, which I
Oh,
thought
I
was
heard
wild.
about this. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So
That's ridiculous.
all right, I drive there because I'm not going to do rideshare from where I live,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not coming in from the city or mass transit. So I need a parking spot. So the American Dream Mall is across the street. I have to basically buy a ticket to park at the American Dream Mall. My friend asked me how much parking was for that.
I'll say 200.
350. I was like, they only allow for 5 spots, or excuse me, 5,000 spots. Like that's almost $2 million they're basically getting at the American Dream for parking, which is
Yeah.
really crazy. And then so at that point you have a significant walk, not terrible, but it's a good amount, a good walk over. But once you crossed the security with the ticket and you got into, the area, the experience and everything came to life. And it was just, it was well worth it at the end of the day. It was well worth it to see her smile and for her to get a chance again, to see Neymar play, see Brazil play, and to be a part of an experience like that.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad you guys got to do that. One last question about that. From your perspective, and as far as you could tell, how did the pitch look? Because, there's a lot of stuff going around these days about natural grass, and how the NFL players want to have that. And the fact that they brought in all this natural grass to MetLife for these games. Like, did it look good? Was it holding up?
It was
It looked
perfect.
pristine
The field
on
looked
TV.
perfect. The field was pristine. Yeah, it was pristine all the way through. And the fact that it's such an insult when they talk about injuries, to, joints, but also head injuries on a turf. Like it's just insulting that you don't provide a grass field. We live in a world where we could do a lot of amazing things from a technology standpoint, and to preserve the field, even in weather, even in
Yeah.
cold weather, rainy weather, snowy weather. Like, we could figure it out. The Bills did it with their new stadium, right? Again, like to me, the fact that all these outdoor venues are not doing it, and quite honestly, indoor, if they don't do it, it's just an excuse. They can figure out how to grow healthy grass indoors and protect these athletes. And again, I think for us, where we grew up seeing a lot majority of games on grass, and it's just a better feel to the game. Also, at the same time, right? Like if you are really worried about injuries, I'd rather have my guys on grass as opposed to on turf. It just is
Oh,
what it
yeah.
is.
There should be a uniform surface, man. A uniform grass surface for every stadium just to make it, an equal playing field. And you try to reduce injury. And yeah, they talk about that, and then but they talk about wanting to increase the number of games, but you're worried about all the head injuries and stuff like that. To me,
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
vibe.
You want to make all this extra money with TV, the extra gate for another game, etc. You can't maintain
Doesn't
grass.
make sense.
Like stop.
That was another thing. That was something I was thinking about because I saw a lot of chatter about that on social media.
94 World Cup in Detroit, Brazil played indoors on grass. Like, you know,
At the
we,
Silver
we
Dome.
we were doing this. Yeah, we were doing this three
That's
decades ago.
wild.
So stop it, right? Stop it.
On
But
that note,
again, it was great. I loved it. And, we're in store for a good final either way. As long as the French don't win, we'll take it.
well, guys, I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of the Unqualified podcast. We'll be back soon with a training camp preview. There's little Benito. We'll be back with a training camp preview for the Jets and Jaguars in a few weeks. And if you're not following us on Instagram, check us out at the UQ Podcast. And you can catch full episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. For Brendan, I'm Pat. Catch you guys next time.
Don't forget Benny.
Benny.